Before you blink, hit subscribe, crush like, and drop a comment. Because once this story starts, there's no safe way out. The snow along the Orenburg Highway was stained dark, not by shadows, but by something far worse. Red and blue lights slashed through the winter night as police vehicles skidded to a stop near an abandoned checkpoint. Its concrete walls cracked like old bones. A truck sat jackknifed across the road, engine still coughing, steam rising into the frozen air. Inside the cab, slumped against the steering wheel, was a man who had no right to still be alive and no intention of dying quietly. His name was Artem Volkov. By sunrise, every major crime unit in the region would know it. By nightfall, his name would be whispered inside a prison so brutal that even the guards feared it. But in that moment, as officers approached the truck with weapons drawn, Artem Volkov smiled through blood-split lips. He knew exactly where he was going, and he knew what he would become there. 3 months earlier, the first body surfaced beneath the ice of the Ural River. No ID, no wallet, just a crude tattoo on the wrist, a wolf with its jaws sewn shut. Investigators initially dismissed it as another gang execution. Russia had no shortage of those. But when a second body appeared, then a third, each with the same stitched-mouthed wolf carved into flesh, panic spread through the criminal underworld. Someone was sending a message, and every message led back to Artem Volkov. Volkov wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't post photos with stacks of cash or surround himself with armed men. His power came from silence. Born in a collapsing industrial town, he grew up watching factories shut down and men drink themselves into graves. By 25, Artem controlled smuggling routes stretching from Kazakhstan to Moscow. By 30, politicians returned his calls. By 35, people started disappearing. Detective Sergei Malenkov had been chasing Volkov's shadow for years. Every crime scene told the same story: precision, restraint, and patience. Volkov never touched a weapon himself. He orchestrated, directed, watched. Then came the night everything unraveled. A protected witness vanished from a safe house outside Samara. 2 guards were found alive but catatonic, sitting in chairs, hands zip-tied, eyes open, TVs blaring static. On the wall, written in black marker, were 4 words: "Silence keeps you alive." That witness had agreed to testify against Volkov. And suddenly, Volkov wasn't hiding anymore. The chase began just before midnight. Border Patrol cameras caught Volkov's convoy racing south, headlights off, using back roads only locals knew. When police intercepted, the lead vehicle exploded into flames, a decoy. By the time officers regrouped, Volkov was already miles away, driving alone, no protection, no backup. That should have terrified him. Instead, it freed him. The pursuit ended violently at the old checkpoint. Volkov crashed, not accidentally, but deliberately. When officers dragged him from the wreckage, they found no weapons, no documents, nothing linking him directly to the murders. Just that wolf tattoo, real this time, etched into his own wrist. At the station, he said only one thing: "Send me where monsters go." The trial was swift, surgical, and heavily sealed. Evidence emerged from places no one expected: encrypted ledgers, financial trails, testimony from men who had sworn loyalty to Volkov until the moment they realized he had already replaced them. He was convicted on multiple counts: organized murder, conspiracy, trafficking, corruption. Life imprisonment. No parole. No transfer. The destination was spoken in hushed tones by guards who had served decades. Black Dolphin Prison. Officially, it was Penal Colony Number 6. Unofficially, it was the end of identity. The place where serial killers, terrorists, and the irredeemable were buried alive. Inmates were marched blindfolded, hands cuffed behind their backs, heads forced down so they never learned the layout. Cells designed to break posture, silence designed to break minds. Men entered screaming. Men left in coffins. When Volkov arrived, guards expected the same. They were wrong. From the moment he crossed the threshold, something shifted. He followed every rule too perfectly. Never spoke out of turn. Never resisted. Never complained. When beaten during intake, He didn't cry out. When placed in isolation, he slept calmly, as if waiting for a scheduled meeting. Other inmates noticed. Whispers spread through concrete walls, tapped through pipes, carried by glances in the corridor. Volkov was listening, always listening. Within weeks, incidents began to occur. A guard slipped on stairs that were dry. Another found threatening letters written in handwriting that matched no inmate. 2 rival prisoners stopped eating altogether after a single conversation with Volkov during transport, a conversation no one could hear. Then came the suicide. An inmate serving multiple life sentences was found hanging in his cell. No note, no prior attempts. Just one strange detail. Carved into the concrete beside his bed was a stitched-mouthed wolf. Malenkov received the report late at night. Black Dolphin was supposed to contain monsters. Instead, it appeared to be feeding one. The final piece arrived in a sealed envelope marked confidential. Inside was a transcript from a prison phone call, one Volkov was never supposed to have access to. The voice on the other end wasn't Russian. It was American. And it said, "We're ready to publish." Malenkov stared at the page, heart pounding. Because if Artem Volkov was doing what Malenkov feared, turning the most feared prison on earth into a platform, then Black Dolphin wasn't holding him. It was amplifying him. And when investigators unlocked Volkov's cell for an unscheduled search, they discovered something that froze everyone in place. On the wall, hidden beneath layers of scratch concrete, was a map, not of the prison, but of the world outside. And next to it, written carefully, patiently, were the words. Chapter 2. The Prison That Listens. Black Dolphin Prison was designed to erase men, not rehabilitate them, not reform them, erase them. Every corridor was built to disorient, every rule engineered to humiliate. Inmates were identified by numbers, not names. Guards rotated constantly, so no one formed attachments. Even conversations were discouraged. Silence was the real sentence. Yet somehow, Artem Volkov was being heard. The map found in his cell was confiscated immediately. Investigators tore the concrete apart, looking for hidden messages, codes, anything that explained how a man locked in one of the most isolated prisons on Earth could be tracking events beyond its walls. They found nothing. No contraband. No notes. No illegal phone. And that terrified them more than if they had. Because whatever Volkov was doing, he wasn't doing it alone. Detective Sergei Malenkov flew to Orenburg the same night. The warden, a grizzled veteran named Victor Karolin, met him at the gates with a face carved from stone. Karolin had overseen Black Dolphin for 15 years. He had watched murderers beg, war criminals collapse, serial killers eat their own tongues to feel something. "I don't believe in legends," Karolin said as they walked through the steel corridors. "This prison kills legends." Malenkov didn't argue. He simply asked one question. "Then why are your guards afraid?" Karolin stopped walking. They stood beneath flickering fluorescent lights, the air heavy with disinfectant and something older, despair. Finally, the warden exhaled. "Because Volkov doesn't threaten," he said. "He predicts." The first prediction came quietly. A senior guard named Alexei Morozov was found shaking in the locker room before his shift. He claimed Volkov had spoken to him during a routine escort 3 days earlier. Just one sentence, murmured so softly it barely registered. "Your daughter shouldn't walk home alone on Thursdays." Morozov reported it as psychological intimidation, a common tactic, until Thursday arrived, and Morozov's daughter was nearly abducted outside her school. The attacker fled when bystanders intervened. He was never caught. Volkov had no phone, no visitors, no outside contact. Yet he knew. The second prediction was worse. An inmate transfer scheduled for the following week was abruptly canceled after Karolin received an anonymous tip warning of an ambush on the transport convoy. Internal Affairs investigated the source. No one could trace it. 2 days later, another convoy on the same route was attacked. 3 guards were killed. The message was clear. Volkov wasn't reacting to the system. He was inside it. Malenkov demanded access to Volkov. Carolyn refused at first, citing protocol. But pressure came from Moscow, from offices that didn't like surprises, especially not ones that hinted a maximum security prison had been compromised. When Malenkov finally stood outside Volkov's cell, he felt it, the strange gravity the man carried. Volkov sat on the narrow bed, hands folded, posture perfect. His eyes lifted before the slot opened, as if he already knew who was there. "You're late," Volkov said calmly. Malenkov ignored the comment. "How are you communicating with the outside world?" Volkov smiled faintly. "The outside world talks too much." "You're facing life imprisonment," Malenkov said. "No appeals. No release." "I'm aware." "Then why build a map of the world on your wall?" Volkov leaned back. "To remind myself where my voice goes." Malenkov felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You don't have a voice here." Volkov's eyes hardened. "This prison is full of mouths," he said. "And every mouth belongs to someone outside." Before Malenkov could respond, alarms blared down the corridor. The lockdown lasted 6 hours. An inmate in another wing had attacked a guard with a sharpened toothbrush, a crude weapon, but effective. The guard survived. Barely. What made the incident unusual wasn't the violence. It was the timing. The attacker had been in solitary confinement. No contact. No recent disputes. When questioned, he repeated only one phrase, over and over. "He told me it was time." The inmate was executed by the state months later. Volkov never acknowledged it. As weeks passed, patterns emerged. Inmates aligned themselves silently. No overt gangs. No obvious leaders. But conflict stopped where Volkov's influence touched. Violence dropped in some areas, spiked in others. Always strategic, always targeted. And then the books appeared. Not physically, digitally. An underground publisher in Europe released an anonymous manuscript titled The Silence Doctrine. It dissected power, fear, and control with surgical precision. Critics called it disturbing. Former criminals called it familiar. Inside were phrases Malenkov recognized. Sentences Volkov had spoken during interrogations. The stitched-mouthed wolf became a symbol online. Graffiti appeared in Berlin, Chicago, Marseille. A movement began to coalesce, part criminal philosophy, part manifesto. Journalists hunted for the author. Malenkov already knew. What terrified him wasn't that Volkov was inspiring people. It was that Volkov was editing reality from a concrete box. Then came the betrayal. Warden Carolyn was found dead in his office one morning. Official cause, heart attack. Unofficial whispers told a different story. Carolyn had been scheduled to testify before a closed committee about security breaches. His computer was wiped clean, except for one file left deliberately untouched. A single image. A stitched-mouthed wolf. Malenkov arrived too late. Standing in the silent office, staring at the screen, he understood the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. Black Dolphin wasn't compromised. It was recruited. Guards, clerks, drivers, small favors, quiet deals, promises of protection. Volkov didn't need phones or visitors. He used people who went home at night. People with families. People who thought they were untouchable. Volkov had turned the most feared prison in Russia into a command center. And he wasn't done. That night, Malenkov received a message on his personal phone. No number. No trace. Just text. "You're chasing the wrong ending." Attached was a photograph taken hours earlier. It showed Malenkov's apartment door from the inside, and beneath the image were words that made his blood run cold. Malenkov didn't go home that night. He sat in his car outside headquarters, engine off, watching the reflection of his own face in the windshield. The photograph wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of proximity. Volkov wasn't reaching toward him. He was already inside his life. Internal Affairs launched an emergency sweep of Black Dolphin. Guards were interrogated, financial records frozen, communications monitored down to the minute. Dozens were suspended. A few confessed to minor favors, moving inmates during shifts, delaying inspections, passing along harmless messages they claimed they never understood. None admitted to knowing Volkov's full plan. That was the most damning part. Volkov didn't run an organization anymore. He ran an idea, and ideas didn't need chains of command. As pressure mounted, violence outside the prison began to mirror the silence within it. In Moscow, a mid-level crime boss was executed in a parking garage. No witnesses. No shell casings. Just a single symbol carved into the concrete beside the body. In Warsaw, a human trafficking route collapsed overnight after anonymous tips flooded authorities with exact locations, names, and schedules. In Chicago, federal agents intercepted a shipment of weapons linked to a decades-old criminal network, one that had supposedly gone dormant. Each event looked disconnected, until Malenkov overlaid the timelines. Every strike happened shortly after Volkov's controlled movements within the prison, a medical visit, a cell inspection, a transfer down a corridor where certain guards were present. Volkov wasn't sending orders. He was triggering systems already in motion. Malenkov requested another interview. This time, Volkov was waiting, standing when the door opened. His face looked thinner, sharper, but his eyes were steady, alert, alive in a place designed to extinguish that. "You see it now," Volkov said softly. "You're using the prison as a filter," Malenkov replied. "You let pressure build, then release it." Volkov nodded. "Cages don't stop predators. They teach them efficiency." "You're causing deaths." "I'm removing noise." Malenkov slammed a file onto the table. "Your book. Your symbol. People are following you." Volkov smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "People have always followed something. I just gave them structure." "Why?" Malenkov asked. "You're never getting out." "That's the lie you keep telling yourself," Volkov said. "Freedom isn't geography." Before Malenkov could respond, Volkov leaned forward. "Ask yourself this," he whispered. "How many people would need to act for me to escape?" Malenkov's mouth went dry. "None," Volkov continued. "Because I don't need to leave." That same night, an emergency meeting was called in Moscow. The decision was swift and unprecedented. Artem Volkov would be permanently isolated. No movement. No interviews. No visibility. He would be erased inside the eraser. The transfer to a deep isolation wing was scheduled for dawn. But dawn never came clean. At 4:12 a.m., Black Dolphin lost power. Backup generators kicked in, but not all systems came online. Cameras in one corridor went dark for exactly 90 seconds. When power returned, Volkov's cell door was still locked. Volkov was still inside, calm, seated, hands folded. Nothing appeared wrong, until guards checked the adjacent cell. The inmate inside, a former contract killer who had never spoken to Volkov directly, was dead. No signs of struggle. No visible wounds. Just one thing missing: his tongue. Carved into his chest was a message, written with surgical precision. Silence travels. The isolation order was canceled. No one wanted to admit why. Fear had replaced protocol. Malenkov stood alone in the observation corridor, staring through reinforced glass at Volkov's cell. For the first time, he understood the real danger. Volkov wasn't trying to escape justice. He was rewriting it. By the time authorities shut him down, his influence would already be irreversible, embedded in networks, movements, and minds far beyond any prison wall. And somewhere, someone was preparing the final act. As Malenkov turned to leave, his phone vibrated one last time. A new message. No image. Just text. The ending that escaped the cell. The official statement said Artem Volkov had been neutralized. Not executed. Not silenced. Neutralized. A word chosen carefully, as if language itself could contain what had happened next. For 72 hours, Volkov's cell remained sealed. No interviews. No escorts. No movement. Guards delivered food through a slot and retrieved untouched trays. Medical checks were conducted through reinforced glass. Volkov appeared alive, seated, eyes open, breathing steady. Then the world outside began to fracture. The first collapse came quietly. A publishing house in London withdrew the silence doctrine after discovering its anonymous funding traced back to shell companies linked to victims of organized crime. The media spun it as coincidence. Malenkov knew better. The second collapse was louder. A congressional task force in the United States announced indictments against multiple figures connected to transnational criminal networks. One of the names on the list made Malenkov freeze. A former Interpol consultant. A man who had once advised Malenkov himself. The third collapse was personal. Malenkov returned home for the first time in weeks. His apartment was untouched. No forced entry. No mess. But on his kitchen table sat a thin notebook bound in black. Inside were his own case notes. Not copies. The originals. Every annotation. Every doubt. Every name he had crossed out, believing them cleared. On the final page, written in unfamiliar handwriting, was a single line. You were never meant to stop me, only to document me. Malenkov understood then what Volkov had built. Not an empire, a mirror. Inside Black Dolphin, something unprecedented happened. Guards began requesting transfers. Veteran officers resigned without explanation. Younger recruits refused postings. The prison still stood, but its aura had changed. Fear had turned inward. When Volkov was finally removed from his cell, it wasn't during a riot or escape attempt. It was during a routine inspection, ordered from Moscow with no signatures attached. The cell was empty. No broken locks. No alarms triggered. No tunnels. Just a neatly folded uniform on the bed, and carved deep into the concrete where the map once was, a final image of the stitched-mouthed wolf, its jaws now open. Volkov had not escaped. He had been removed. By whom, no one could prove. The truth emerged slowly, unwillingly, through layers of sealed testimony and classified hearings that would never be released to the public. Volkov had anticipated everything. The isolation order, the purge, the attempt to erase him. Years earlier, long before his arrest, Volkov had embedded contingencies inside institutions, not through loyalty, but through leverage. Secrets traded for silence. Silence traded for access. Access traded for inevitability. Black Dolphin was never the cage. It was the stage. The real sentence Volkov served wasn't confinement. It was transformation. He became untouchable by becoming unnecessary. By the time authorities realized this, Volkov was already gone, not physically roaming free, but dissolved into systems that could no longer distinguish his will from their own momentum. No sightings were ever confirmed. No fingerprints recovered. No recordings authenticated. Yet his influence lingered. Crime syndicates stopped glorifying chaos and began operating with surgical discipline. Violence became rare, but devastating when it happened. Anonymous leaks dismantled entire organizations overnight. Whistleblowers appeared with impossible timing. And always, somewhere in the margins, the symbol surfaced. A wolf. Mouth unstitched. Malenkov was offered a promotion. He declined. Instead, he resigned quietly and disappeared into academic obscurity, teaching criminal psychology at a small university under a different spelling of his name. He never spoke publicly about Volkov, never wrote a book, never gave interviews. But he kept one thing, the black notebook. Years later, a journalist tracked him down, asking a single question. Do you believe Artem Volkov is still alive? Malenkov paused before answering. Alive is the wrong word, he said. Relevant is the right one. The journalist pressed. Was he a monster? Malenkov shook his head. Monsters crave attention. Volkov craved permanence. The final twist didn't come from Russia. It came from a prison in the American Midwest. A lifer serving multiple sentences was found dead in his cell. No struggle, no contraband, just a carving scratched into the steel bed frame. A wolf, jaws open, and beneath it, words that would never make the evening news. Stories don't end. They relocate. Authorities dismissed the connection. They always did. But somewhere in the silence between systems, something listened. Something patient. something that never needed to escape. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.